we're not looking at the ability here, because we know that these tradeswomen are all just as qualified as their male counterparts. This is more down to just, normalising women in trade, lifting them up, giving them an option. On top of that, really, like the UK we've got a bit of a problem on our hands when it comes to the amount of tradespeople that we actually have, whatever their gender. We're ignoring 50% of the population by kind of not promoting women in trade and getting them into the trades.
We're kind of acknowledging that, there is a challenge there we need to support, but people might not actually know what the next steps are. I guess the question is, what could people do individually, not just kind of waiting for the whole, actual companies itself to change. This is the FieldRocket Podcast. I'm your host, Tulloch Priest, and today we're joined by Anna Moynihan. And Anna is the co-founder and CEO of TaskHer. TaskHer is an online booking system that links tradeswomen with customers all over the country. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to be talking about women in the trades. Why should people care about this conversation?
I think this conversation really matters because we're solving a problem that impacts lives across the country. Diversity inclusion in traditionally male-dominated space is a really big issue.
Why is that an issue? Like, why does the sex of the person that's fitting a boiler or fixing your heater, make a difference?
The trades industry is a really outdated industry. So if you look at the sort of numbers of women in trade at the moment, only around 5% of tradespeople in the UK are actually female. On top of that, really, like the UK we've got a bit of a problem on our hands when it comes to the amount of tradespeople that we actually have, whatever their gender. We're ignoring 50% of the population by kind of not promoting women in trade and getting them into the trades. And it's something that's sort of just been assumed is okay. If you look at any other field and the number of women in that field was so low, you'd probably be quite surprised. But for some reason in the trade industry, it's kind of assumed that that's okay and that it's fine for it to be male dominated.
Do you think that it's the challenge is it's by choice, that female are not choosing, or, there's kind of other, it's not kind of been seen as a viable option, or why do you think, we have this situation?
I think it's a number of factors. I think primarily, just from a young age, little girls are given sort of unicorns and princess dresses. Little boys are given toolkits and cars. And, that's something that I think, this generation of parents are addressing. But, there's still plenty of children out there that don't sort of have a diverse range of toys as they go through school. If they're not maybe going on to university, it tends to be that women or young sort of school-leaving women are encouraged into sort of more female-led trades, things like cosmetology and hairdressing and childcare, which are all obviously fantastic careers, but their male peers are sort of encouraged into sort of skilled trades like, electrical, plumbing, heating and gas. And they get paid a significant amount more than the female sort of focused trades. So I think the sort of number is around, I think women working in sort of like childcare and cosmetology stand to lose around nearly £1 million in lifetime earnings compared to their male peers who sort of move into skilled trades. And so, it starts from really early doors. And then once you actually, get to the point where you're trained up, or you want to train, if you are a female and you would like the idea of working in skilled trades, there's loads of hurdles to overcome. The finding a course where you're not the only woman, being accepted by your peers, finding a job after that, finding training, and people sort of just assuming that you're not, you're on reception, or that you're doing, again, one of those kind of softer skills. So like the hurdles are just continuously there. Ultimately, you want to see people like you where you're working. You want to, especially when you're young and you're starting off in your career, and walking on the job and being the only female is actually quite intimidating, regardless of the motives of the other tradespeople. And so, like, one thing that we're doing with TaskHer is try to kind of normalize that, like normalize women in trade and give these kind of younger women who are coming up through the ranks, some people to look at and to aspire to.
So you kind of have like the social pressures, like society norms, etc. And then you've got the lack of role models. And then you've also got, the practicalities or possible perceptions. Like I would imagine there's a range of apprentices who are looking for roles, that might put you at a disadvantage. Is that what you're saying?
I think we've definitely had a lot of stories around that. We've had stories of apprentices looking for, trainees or looking for apprentice roles, or, to just gather experience. And every time they've phoned, whatever trade company they're looking for the experience with, they're sort of asked, who are you calling for? We've had one tradeswoman told us, like, people repeatedly asked who she was calling for. Was she calling for her son? And she was like, no, I'm calling for me. And she tried hundreds, and eventually she ends up getting trained up by a fellow female plumber. But finding that female plumber was actually really tricky. That kind of exposure. That when you're looking at kind of traditional platforms where you're finding tradespeople, there is really a sort of really small representation of women on there. So it's difficult to find them until TaskHer, obviously.
Okay, so it's kind of like an interesting kind of mix. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the background of TaskHer?
It was a few years ago, so sort of end of 2020 and start of 2021, myself and my husband were doing some work on our house, and I sort of decided that I was going to be the one that had to find the tradespeople that we needed. So we didn't have anybody in our network. We didn't have any kind of referrals from trainings because we were kind of new to the area. So I was using online directories to read reviews, email tradespeople, and basically chase them until they came to our house to have a look at the job that needs to be done. And I found, firstly, I found that process a bit irritating because the onus was on me as a customer. And then when I did get the tradespeople around to our house, who were all men, because when I was looking at all of these platforms, no women were sort of visible to me, and I hadn't even considered it. So there was definitely some unconscious bias there. But anyway, they sort of all of them arrived at our house, and immediately would start speaking to my husband and not to me. And I just found it really frustrating because I'd obviously been their sort of main port of call. So I wondered if I'd have a different experience with a female, and went online just sort of assuming that there would be something like TaskHer that would represent women in trade, because there'd just been no representation for them anywhere else, any of the kind of like main players I'd been looking at, and there just was nothing, and I couldn't believe it. And so the more I kind of dug into the data around women in trade, and what kind of lucrative and sort of aspirational career it actually can be, and how flexible it is if you're working for yourself, how actually perfect it is for women who tend to be the carers and obviously are, mothers. And the idea kind of came from there. And we started building it, getting some smaller rounds of investment to build the product, and started building our community of tradeswomen.
Okay. So, and just to kind of jump back a little bit, like you spoke a little bit about being a female customer, the tradespeople that you had around, speak to your husband. Were you able to find a female sort of tradesperson to do any of the work?
We did, but it was they weren't sort of from the main platforms and directories that you would think of. We ended up going on Instagram and finding that there was actually more of a representation, like women, female plumbers and electricians that we needed. They, you could use that search within Instagram to find women in your area. But I suppose one of the basically, like it tends to be that if you are a tradesperson, and obviously this is a massive blanket kind of assumption and rule, but if you work in the trades, you're brilliant at your trade. You could, you're great with your hands. You really, you do all the stuff that I don't know how to do. You're not always brilliant at marketing yourself. And a lot of the current directories, and I keep sort of mentioning the bigger players, they work with models that mean that the people that get the most bookings, the people that have got more money, that they've been on those profiles for longer, they tend to be at the top of the pile, so they just get more and more work. The people at the bottom get less. And so, obviously when there's a significant amount more male tradespeople than female tradespeople, you're only really going to get served.
Okay.
Whereas on platforms like Instagram, we were able to dig out a few. So we were able to find them. It was just that there was no one sort of pushing women to the top of the pile and saying, do you know what, like, these are really great. And actually, have you even considered the fact that you've not even thought of a woman? And it's probably not crossed your mind. All of the language we use, tradesmen, handyman, like everything there's always an assumption that it's going to be a man. And that is something that, again, like if you look at other industries, I think like in the late 60s, the percentage of female solicitors in the late 60s was something like 2%. Now it's 52%. And I can't imagine living in a world where there were only 2% of female solicitors. It seems crazy to me, but yet for some reason, again, like the trades industry, massively outdated. We just sort of, everyone seems to be okay with it, and it's never really been challenged until now.
Are you fed up with drowning in a pile of paperwork that comes with running your heating and plumbing business? Gas Engineer Software is an easy-to-use, all-in-one job management system made especially for UK heating and plumbing companies. From handling customer details to building quotes, issuing certificates and sending invoices, Gas Engineer Software will help you save time, eliminate paperwork, and make running your business easy. Start a free trial by clicking on the link in the bio. Yeah, from from a customer's point of view, if I need an engineer, let's say a gas engineer or something like that, I would do a search. I would look at whatever the reviews are, and then I would just go with that. But for me, as a customer, whether they were male or female, wouldn't really come into it. I'd call whatever company that had good reviews, etc., and then just go with that. I'm just kind of thinking, like, from a customer's kind of point of view, like, what could you do aside from just actively looking just for females, and does it make a kind of like a difference? I'm not sure how to ask the question, but how would it make a difference to a customer whether it's a male or female that comes?
I think there's a wide variety of reasons as to why. I mean, if you look at our customer base, it's around 80% female, 20% male. And our customers come to us for a number of reasons. Obviously, you are male. So maybe it's just not something that you'd have that kind of like assumption that you'll quite happily feel comfortable with both male or female, and that's fantastic. Whether or not when you're searching online if you sort of Google, plumber, wherever you live, chances are it's always going to be a man that comes up. Therefore, you're always going to book a man, and you're fine with that. If you're a woman living alone, you might feel more comfortable having another woman in the house, and so but you assume that there's no option for that, because every time you look for a plumber in your area, it's always going to be men coming up. So you just sort of, grit your teeth and I'm not saying, and I think that we always come from the standpoint, we're not saying every man is predatory. It's not about that. It's about the fact that you just sometimes feel more comfortable with your own gender. And I think that, there's definitely customers who just genuinely feel more comfortable. I mean, I think the majority of our customers just feel really passionate about the fact that there are still these industries out there that are so hugely dominated by men, and they want to support the women that are basically like blazing a trail within those industries. And the fact that we're giving them this option to not only just book them, but book them really easily, is sort of a no-brainer. I think, and there's argument. We've had feedback around kind of like they feel that maybe women are more communicative. They explain the problem a bit better. And on the flip side, we have people that just assume that maybe women are going to be tidier or more friendly, and that isn't always the case, because these are just tradeswomen. So, like, I think there's a huge reason why there's a huge variety of reasons why people would prefer a woman.
Yeah, I like the point that you made about there's that assumption that it's going to be a man, so you don't actually think that there's actually a choice in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was the same. I mean, that's the reason TaskHer started. It didn't even cross my mind when I first started looking that I could look for a woman, because if you look at every other platform, there might be the token woman on the homepage somewhere, but I'd put money on the fact that out of 10 people on that website for photos of tradespeople, there'll be one woman, and when you are searching through those directories, you're just not given the option. And and again, everyone has their own preferences, but there should be a choice, and that's essentially what we're giving people. I think I know men that would prefer a female too, like the LGBTQ community. They hugely a lot of customers from there. I mean, my husband, who's also my co-founder, I think that traditionally a lot of tradespeople are quite macho, want to talk about the footy, and my husband is not like that. He doesn't like football. He doesn't want to be a lad. And so he feels a bit more uncomfortable around a male tradesman, probably would prefer a female. So, a lot of it is just around that. We're not looking at the ability here, because we know that these tradesmen are all just as qualified as their male counterparts. They've been through all the same qualifications. They've got the same experience. This is more down to just, normalising women in trade, lifting them up, giving them an option, and recruiting more women into the trades and showing them. But you're never going to recruit more women into an industry that's completely dominated by men, where they kind of quite clearly aren't very welcome, because why would they? Why would you do that? So we're trying to make this space more enticing and show the really great sides of working in skilled trades, of which there are many.
So you're showing that for customers, there's an option of a female, but also from females as they're growing up, that this is a possible career path for them as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we're an impact-focused startup. That's what we kind of call ourselves. That's where we fall in the kind of world of startups. Our impact is really not on the customer side. The impact is on the tradeswoman side. Obviously, we want to support customers, and the idea for TaskHer came from us as customers. But the more we kind of looked into the world of trade, we realized the impact is really on that side of the tradeswomen and the next generation of tradeswomen coming up through the ranks. And the fact that as a country, we need a significant amount more tradespeople. And, ultimately, if we're just going to ignore all the women and not encourage them in, then we're stupid, because we're just not going to have enough. So, there's so many reasons why we want to support them.
Yeah. And so what would be what's your actual goal for TaskHer? What would be the ideal outcome?
I think we've always kind of looked at ourselves as, I don't even know, the dating app Hinge, which is basically I don't know what I can't remember what the tagline is, but it's basically download the app to delete it, as in download the app, find someone, and then you delete the dating app because you found your partner. And ultimately, the ultimate goal is that we shouldn't be needed. And I don't think that's going to happen for a really long time. I don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime. But, ultimately, we shouldn't need a platform to bring women to the top of the trade and to normalise women in trade, and to even just have photos of women in trade. When we first started TaskHer, and we were sort of building our site and working on our brand and, creating collateral and creatives, and there was just nothing. If you look at all the stock image sites, there's really cheesy photos of women in pink hard hats, fixing a sink, you'd need a hard hat to fix a sink. But there was no imagery of genuine tradeswomen anywhere. And so we've had to create all of our own imagery, and just stuff like that. That should be the norm. That should be, that's where we're aiming for. We don't essentially, we don't want to exist, because the trade should be an equal opportunities industry.
We've kind of talked about, you mentioned sort of there's kind of barriers to entry, as you're younger, girls are kind of looking at the different career paths, etc. But you haven't, what kind of happens once they've actually started work? Are there any kind of barriers, or sort of are there challenges that sort of around to that stage of it?
Yeah, sadly. Obviously, the majority of the information we're getting is obviously through tradeswomen that we work with. So it's first-hand information. And if you look at less so with customers who are kind of homeowners, because ultimately, if you're a homeowner and you've got a tradeswoman, most likely the likelihood is you've spoken to them already. You probably sort them out, so you know who's coming to your house, and you probably prefer a tradeswoman. If you're booking we've had stories of tradeswomen sort of turning up to houses to do a job when they've worked for bigger companies, and the customer's not aware that they're a woman, and they turn up at the door, and the customer's like, well, who are you? Why? No, I don't want you. You're a female. I don't trust you to, do the job that you're here to do. Or just genuine looks of shock that they're female when they arrive, which I think is, again, it's not great when in your day-to-day life, like being like constantly turning up to people's houses and then being surprised at your gender, and probably, judging you based on that. I think the worst stories we've heard are from tradeswomen that have worked on commercial sites, because that is where, I think that is a bit of a sharp pit. We've heard stories of women who've literally had to they've not had toilet facilities. They've had to go and pee in a bush because there's no toilet facilities for them. Had stories around them having to share changing rooms with men because there's been no facilities around that. And then you look at the dynamic on those kind of sites, which are obviously quite bantery, and obviously, again, this is not every single man, this is not every single tradesman, but I think on the whole, the dynamic is that they are rigged and taken the mickey out of and questioned around their skill set because of their gender. And I think, a lot of these tradeswomen are just sort of used to it, and they just ignore it, and it's water off a duck's back, and they can play along, but it is probably quite exhausting. And I think when you look at the whole picture of, it's not just that day on site, it's going through their training with all of these, younger men who are, young boys at college are probably not as fun to work with. And then, then going on to site, I think after a while, it really chips away at you. And there's probably a limit of the amount of jokes that you can have at your capability because of your gender.
Even if it's water off a duck's back, those kind of, if it is that kind of sort of environment, it does have an impact. It will build up.
I think so. I mean, I think it has an impact on tradesmen as well. I think there's obviously a lot of tradesmen out there that aren't massively thrilled at the idea of the constant ribbing. And there's probably a lot of men out there that don't like it too, but obviously, your prime target, if you're the only woman on site, chances are there's going to be a group of men on there that are just not going to leave you alone. And it's exhausting when you're just as skilled, if not more skilled, depending on what you're doing, than other people. So we do find that the older tradesmen that we work with, the ones that who've reskilled later in life, they've got less tolerance, as it comes with age, doesn't it? And they're very happy to put them in their place. But I think as a younger woman who's a school leaver or an apprentice, I think it's hugely intimidating when you're going through that period of your life.
Yeah, I think even if you're male, you just left school, okay, you don't have the added pressure of being the only female on site, but that it's not I would imagine it's not a fun experience. What can we as customers and sort of other tradespeople do to kind of help?
As customers, obviously consider booking a woman, because consider why you're booking the women as well. Is it because you want to support? Is it because you feel more comfortable? Understand that to do the trades, especially, the trades we offer at TaskHer are all skilled trades. So they have qualifications. They've been through all of the exams. They are equally qualified, as equally qualified as all other tradespeople working in that trade who have been verified by a platform. Consider why you're doing it, but look to seek out tradeswomen and support them, and understand that actually, they've probably, I would say probably 100% got some sort of backstory as to why they appreciate customers who are welcoming and supportive of them as tradespeople. I think the world of the trades, there's a lot of work to do. And I think one thing is difficult as a founder, obviously, is completely focused on tradeswomen. Sometimes I find it a bit tricky sort of seeing other brands sort of doing, I don't know what the equivalent is. It's basically, it feels a little bit like, greenwashing like they're sort of doing it, they're sort of popping a woman on their homepage for the sake of it, or they're profiling women for the sake of it, but they're not actually kind of really embedding that into what they're doing. They're not looking to drive more recruitment around tradeswomen. They're not looking to support, funding scholarships for women to learn the trades. And I think there's a lot of work to be done within skilled trades, and there's also a lot of really great people who are working to do that too. But I do think it's not something that's going to change overnight, sadly.
Okay, and if you were a tradesperson working in a company, you can obviously possibly step in and sort of make it more balanced. Anything else that's sort of people could do to kind of help out?
I suppose there's also outside of the kind of trades platforms or trades businesses, there's also the sort of side of brands. If you're looking at suppliers, but whether it's equipment or clothing or PPE, things like that, there's still a huge amount of work to be done around making those kind of environments more inclusive. We worked with a brand recently who just launched a women's wear brand for construction, which is great, and there's a couple more out there. But it should be that every single brand should offer both male and female clothing for working on site, and it shouldn't really be a PR exercise. It should just be the norm. The same goes for sort of that inclusivity and the environment in sort of trade suppliers. I know, as obviously just a customer and a layman, I'm not a tradie, but if I go to a trade supplier to go and buy something to do some DIY, which, obviously I still can, I still find it a bit intimidating. And I think those environments have got a lot of work to do. We've had stories from tradeswomen who've gone to, and I'm not going to name names of the suppliers, but they've gone to suppliers and the staff there have clapped them out of the car park because they've managed to reverse their van out of the car park just purely because they're female. Stuff like that. Those, if you look at the surrounding kind of area, the sort of surrounding businesses and platforms and suppliers that work with the trades, they all kind of need to take a look at how they're supporting women and including women in what they do as well.
Chasing late payers, a never-ending pile of paperwork, messy schedules. This isn't what running your heating and plumbing business should be about. Gas Engineer Software is an easy-to-use job management system backed by a team of UK-based support staff. Go paperless to save more than 7 hours each week. Capture extra repeat business and get more done. As an all-in-one job management software, Gas Engineer Software offers paperless certificates, quotes, invoices, automatic service reminders, integrated scheduling, and loads more. Focus on the real work and let our software do the rest. Sign up for a free trial. Yeah, because I kind of feel like if we're kind of acknowledging that, there is a challenge there we need to support, but people might not actually know what the next steps are. Especially to actually move a whole company or changing a whole company's culture is, it's quite a task. You're changing your habits and stuff. So it'd just be kind of, if people are, wanting small something like an employee of a company, you could obviously raise it, etc. But it would be, I guess the question is, what could people do individually, not just kind of waiting for the whole, actual companies itself to change.
I see what you mean. Well, booking tradeswomen, encouraging, if they've had a good experience with a tradeswoman, or they've had a good experience with a platform like TaskHer where you can book tradeswomen, that, as a consumer, as a homeowner, that's a really easy thing to do, to question your colleagues or your friends as to why they've not maybe thought about a woman. And it's not it's not coming from a bad place. It's just coming from an interested place. So that's a really easy thing to do. The more women that are booked, the more money is going to tradeswomen, the more likelihood is that those women will then talk about how great their career is, and it is a snowball effect. I think there's lots. It's a tricky one. You can obviously chip away at things, but ultimately there does need to be an institutional shift, and it is huge and it is really tricky to do. And another thing that we're working to do is to work with schools, which again, I know is obviously an institution, but, we've got a lot of Gen Z tradeswomen who have profiles, who have like online social media profiles with a lot of followers, and they look, the way they look and the way they kind of present themselves is appealing to a school leaver who's looking to potentially consider working in the trades. So we're looking to get those tradeswomen into schools to talk to school leavers, to tell them about their jobs, to explain to them actually it's really great and that you get to work your own hours if you work yourself, and you get that flexibility, and it's really interesting, and you're not just sat in front of a computer all day. But on the flip side, you can also still go out clubbing and, do whatever young people's doing these days. And I think that, that's going to be a massive thing when it comes to supporting women in trade, because they'll help supply the kind of next generation and that kind of pipeline of tradeswomen coming into the industry.
You kind of mentioned about solicitors, in the 1960s, I believe, you said 2%, and then now we have 55% are female. Do you know what kind of caused that change, and whether we can kind of replicate that in the trades industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know exactly what caused that change, but I would imagine when it comes to making those kind of huge shifts, that it would have been a variety of different factors. Obviously, it's a tricky one, because when a solicitor is deemed as quite an aspirational job, right? Like if you're a parent, I don't know if you're a parent, but if you're a parent, if your kid wants to become a solicitor, if your little girl wants to become a solicitor or a doctor, then, great, amazing. That's a really fun thing. And also you can brag about it to your friends. If your daughter wants to become an electrician or a plumber or a heating and gas engineer, there's still a lot of work to be done, I think, with parents, a lot of education around, actually encouraging your kids to do that, because that's still something worthy you're bragging about to your friends. One of the things that we sort of we found talking to institutions and colleges is that parents are a massive roadblocker to kids working in the trades, because they don't want their kid to be a plumber when they're, a nice middle class family, because the trades are deemed to be for working class people, which is frankly ridiculous, because I can tell you every single one of our tradeswomen earns probably double what me and my co-founder earn at the moment. I think like going back to what you asked with regards to how that systemic change within the sort of solicitors in the legal world, I'd imagine it was like, partly to do with like the educational side of things, again, like maybe recruiting more women, showing more women. I don't know the exact story. I was looking at years ago, I looked at these stats around like the different industries and like the level of like gender inequity in them. And that one was the one that really stood out. There was another one around sort of MDs and sort of like high levels. Obviously, we hear a lot about kind of like, in the startup world, there's a lot of chat around kind of investment in women, and only 2% of investment really goes to women in the founders world. So it's still going on there as well. So I don't know if we could necessarily replicate what happened in the legal world, in the trades world, purely because of that major roadblocker from parents. And then obviously then all of the subsequent roadblockers that we have after, like, that we've just spoken about with regards to kind of like what it's like being a woman in the trades. I suppose, like if you're a solicitor, it is more of a professional office environment. Again, it really differs. It is really like a world unto itself, this skilled trades world.
Thank you very much for coming on the show, Anna. Really appreciated you coming on and sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and that was Anna from TaskHer, which is an online booking system linking tradeswomen with customers all over the country. Thank you very much.